Hello. In this video lecture, I would like to discuss aspects of implementation of diversity management in the organizations. We will look at some challenges related to diversity management implementation and some very practical recommendations how to ease diversity management implementation in the organizations. While discussing these aspects, I will try to provide examples related with diversity dimensions that we have not discussed yet. For example, diversity across the organizational positions, socioeconomic diversity of business units, and the like. When companies define how they understand diversity, very frequently focus tend to be on visible aspects of diversity. Implementing diversity management strategy with such focus on visible diversity dimensions in the societies which are highly diverse by many aspects, for example, USA, UK, India, France, and alike, tend to be easy, even if we use tools in diversity management, such as, for example, making diversity issues compulsory in every meeting. However, this focus on visible dimensions might make diversity management strategy implementation in very homogeneous countries, like Finland, very complicated. Therefore, there are a few things to remember. One, when organization chooses to define diversity, it should have some focus, but should also have some doors open, especially if that organization is a multinational corporation. When we implement diversity management strategy across the units, we should start with discussing what the selected key dimensions mean in that unit context and what other aspects are crucial. Further, when we lack visible diversity issues in certain units, it is always good to focus discussion on invisible aspects of diversity because intracultural variance is always there. And finally, if the unit with high visible diversity, in the units with high visible diversity, it is important to go beyond the visible factors too, and understand that each individual is unique and carries other aspects to be utilized and observed than only few visible dimensions that were initially discussed. So these aspects of diversity dimension should reflect in manager behavior and organizational processes and tools used to support diversity management in the organizations. The other frequent trap is that diversity management implementation efforts are frequently perceived as the ones which are leading to no conflict in organizations. But it's a very wrong perception. Good diversity management should teach people how to raise doubts, discuss misunderstandings, problems, and pleasant aspects related to diversity, but approach these conflicts in a suitable, respectful way. If there is no conflict, no challenging each other's position, no progress will be there. And defense is sort of a natural reaction of a human being, but defense prevents us from learning. So if we are over defensive as individual or as organization, we will never move forward. Well, each culture has its own way to approach conflicts. A large amount of nations are highly conflict avoidant, but it does not mean that these cultures do not have mechanisms to debate or challenge. In highly conflict avoidant cultures, challenging may be done personally or by communicating in a special way. So we always need to find the right method according to the context rather than just avoid the conflict in general. Because scientific evidence suggests that perceptions about what conflict delivers are highly flawed. Let's consider. Research by Professor Neal and the colleagues reveals that there is a huge difference between team feeling well about their team members and team actual performance. They looked at what happens when a new member enters the team. When the newcomers were socially similar to the team, all team members reported the highest level of subjective satisfaction with the group's productivity. However, when objective standards were measured, they performed the worst on a group problem-solving tasks. When newcomers were different, old members thought the team performed badly. But in fact, it accomplished its tasks much better than the homogeneous group. Therefore, when we think about the conflict within organizations, we should not stick to only one understanding about what conflict is, what outcomes the conflict brings, and one way to challenge our approach or debate. This also means that in some cases, organization and team leaders might encourage some members to play a devil advocate role, or if internally that is not possible, they could hire a coach for a specific purpose. For example, to challenge assumptions of the team members. And this practice is very good for, let's say, top management teams. In whatever method we choose to debate, and even if conflict becomes open, teams or individuals must always address it. Now, how to address conflict at work in such a way that it would be educating and would lead to effective collaboration further. Here are some tips. So 3 steps, and step number 1 is that we have to accept that hard conversation happened. Leaders or team members should be encouraged to proactively follow the difficult conversation and acknowledge that it was a tough situation, but see it positively, meaning openly appreciate that colleagues were able to come together, identify and discuss a big issue. It is recommended to thank the colleague for taking the time to engage in that difficult conversation. Thanking is never too much and for any reason, and it always helps to sort of reduce the tension. Step number 2, it's always good to be proactive and try to search ways to move on. So follow-up email could help. And email in such a situation is the one which should summarize the conversation and the arguments shared by both sides, by both colleagues. And a written way of continuing this difficult conversation allows avoiding emotional discomfort. It sort of allows to clarify the points of both and allows seeing where the differences and similarities in understandings or interests, and allows searching reconciliation. So email or any other written form is really good. Now, finally, there is step 3. So it's always recommended to put aside difficult situations for a while and try to engage in some activity or conversations in order to strengthen relationships and put the organizational relationship in perspective. So then difficult conversation gets solved easier when both parties are sort of amiable or simply get solved by the time and circumstances. Actively building positive relationships after difficult conversation is not easy, but it is possible and required as a skill for good organizational leaders. So to conclude, sort of change is never easy and diversity management is not always pleasant. That is why skills in conflict management are very important. While pushing organizations to be proactive, sort of pro-diversity and more inclusive, development of such skills can always be facilitated by organizational training and coaching. Now, building long-term relationship between organization and its employees is highly linked with performance management issues. So let's look at what performance management system would be fair and effective in the eyes of diverse employees. Performance management systems have much better chance of being perceived as fair when they have these 3 elements. So number 1, linking performance goals to business priorities. Number 2, include coaching by managers. And number 3, having sort of differentiating compensation. What does it mean? Let's go step by step. So linking individual or team KPIs or key performance indicators with corporate or business strategy so that it would be clear to all parties involved is not easy, but it's possible. So balance scorecard or similar tools all sort of allow people in the organization connecting dots about what they do and why. But to use these tools really effectively, organizations should link a general strategy presentation with, for example, development discussions. And that allows employees at all levels participate in developing their own key performance indicators. Also, that should be to follow how actionably the individual goals really are, meaning how much individual can actually influence the goal that is set to him or her, and how much that goal consists of shared team contribution. So that is really also important when trying to link effectively the performance goals to business priorities. And finally, of course, the goals should be always adapted according when strategic situation change. Now, second point, so including coaching by managers. Performance management systems where managers take time and put efforts to coach their subordinates and teams are considered as more effective and fair. Well, for doing coaching, managers need to set a set of soft skills on how to manage difficult conversations, how to motivate and stretch people, and balance yearly goals with short-term daily updates. Therefore, for example, to achieve this, that managers would really know how to do such things. So star managers could be trained initially these soft skills, and later they could run by themselves the sessions on how to approach performance management with individuals and teams in order to embrace diversity management correctly in the whole organization. Now, differentiating compensation. So even if some cultures at least tend to remain silent or avoid using employee ratings, if there is no clear rating system for what performance, what compensation should be given, system is seen as less effective by many employees. So there should be clear criteria for each rating and explanation how these criteria apply. Compensation differences should not be huge, though, because people will immediately start comparing their pay and will be a lot of negative emotions and teamwork will suffer. Also, it is extremely important to supplement monetary benefits with incentives which are not just financial. So, for example, star employees could receive explicit praise or coaching or special assignments. So, individual evaluation linked with these three steps. So with key business goals, with rating system that acknowledges diverse performance, but doesn't overdo it, and which is supplemented by coaching manager behaviors are usually the most effective and seen as most fair. Different organizational level, different organizational background, cultural background, and discipline to which employee or manager belongs to may adjust individual understanding about common terms used in performance management process. For example, such general terms as communication or leadership skills and alike used in performance evaluation templates may be interpreted differently by different people. Thus, the solution would be to develop organizational templates for performance evaluation aligned with these different interpretations. In the example provided in the slide, it seemed that largest diversity while interpreting certain terms might appear among people in different organizational positions. So, template for conducting development discussions was designed while defining what each term means for each organizational level. Then it becomes clear what certain term, which is assessed, means in the context of a specific organizational position. When a person receives such template for his or her evaluation, expectations are clear for everyone and evaluation seems fair. But most importantly, system represents diverse social groups divided upon criteria where diversity matters most in the context of a specific organization. The other very effective tool for managing diversity is mentoring. Mentoring is a process in which more experienced organizational member, meaning mentor, provides advice and guidance to less experienced members or protégés. Mentoring usually has two functions, so career development and social support. And if mentoring is usually used more from social and individual perspective, coaching is usually more focused on business matters and includes less advising, but more facilitation in individual and organizational development process. So we should not mix those terms because they do have a difference. So here we talk about mentoring. So mentors in diversity management context would usually be senior managers from the majority social group. We can see in the picture clear benefits for the protege. From diversity management perspective, it is frequent that when mentor from dominant social group takes in the protege from minority group, minority protege taps into social networks of dominant group and learns about the way dominant group do things. From mentor perspective, it is also a win-win situation, although it may not be so straightforward initially. For example, Harvard's research showed that where managers spend more time with women and minority workers, they learned about the attributes and strengths these groups offered. They started to see the advantages of different differing perspectives, personalities, and experiences, and become influences across the business. So it benefited both groups to understand each other better and find better ways to work together. For organization, of course, it means that inclusiveness has increased. Existence of mentoring relationship can also help fighting certain biases and wrong norms in the organization. For example, research shows that it is considered to be normal if women express anger, limitedness of her capabilities, or asks for help at work. But the same thing is unconsciously seen as not suitable for men. So when men, employees or managers, are in sort of mentor-protege relationship where they are in the position of protege, they are encouraged to seek for advice, guidance, and this allows removing this unconscious expectations towards the men. Now, continuous engagement in diversity management attempts to utilize various diversity management tools may lead to diversity fatigue. Diversity fatigue is best described as a sentiment of disinterest and even sort of dislike of diversity activities that are taking place at an organization. Diversity fatigue should not be confused with the general resistance to change that many people have, because diversity fatigue is not resistance. It's the feeling of being tired, of trying to be more pro-diversity and more aware and less biased and doing myriads of activities for that purpose. So it's really about, trying hard and maybe not always reaching what was expected. The reasons behind diversity fatigue are usually mentioned to be such like lack of senior executive endorsement and involvement, or lack of diversity plan and consistency in diversity management activities, lack of connection between diversity activities and the business case, or lack of recognition and incorporation of changing needs for diversity management, lack of manager and executive accountability, and finally, lack of communication. Therefore, there should be something that would allow us implementing diversity management successfully and avoiding diversity management fatigue. So in order to avoid this lack of planning, consistency, management commitment in execution and endorsement, and other issues that come from continuous, not very successful efforts to engage in diversity management, there are 3 key rules to support diversity management implementation. And I would like to discuss these rules with you. So suggestion number 1 would be to integrate diversity management in everything company does. How to do it effectively? For example, instead of inventing new business or strategic measure to capture diversity management initiatives, it is possible to look at the same measures organization already has, but with the lens of diversity, or by collecting maybe only small extra material which would reflect diversity issues. So let's say company always measure profitability of its units, and if company engages in R&D, they may measure how much innovative output each unit produces. Also, HR, human resources, resource management function usually produces measures on basic dimensions of workforce. So a company could simply correlate profitability with gender or racial diversity in the units or any other dimensions that they're interested in. Or look at innovation output with relationship with gender or racial diversity in the unit. While doing this exercise, HR might be asked to collect more legally available data on other diversity dimensions in each unit. Another example, so company may wish to look at the, for example, project performance data and project management reports. What were the strengths and the weaknesses mentioned during the project execution? These reports are usually available, but company may choose to look at them with the diversity management glasses on and seeking for diversity issues behind the points mentioned in the report. Now, how did that work? So, for example, if there is a comment in this project management project report that there were challenges in the way supplier delivered spare parts or services. So maybe there were too little or too much diversity in the supplier side. Project manager will surely know that, and we can always go and inquire deeper. Maybe there was a groupthink or too much of diversity in opinions, and manager failed to recognize it and manage that. That again can be inquired. Or maybe customer is not satisfied with the design, and that is also might be mentioned in a project report. Maybe the team designing the product was too homogeneous. That question can be asked when seeing such points in the project report. So company doesn't always need to invent new measures, but rather they can utilize existing ones or slightly deepen some specific measurements in order to make diversity work. And final suggestion would be to contextualize. We agreed that adapting to every unit in a large multinational corporation is impossible. But it might be possible if that is aligned with the strategy of the multinational. For example, multinational has multi-domestic strategy and it really localized operations. But in transnational, for example, corporations, that probably won't be the case, and especially not in the global, the ones seeking the global strategy. But even if there is a global strategy and dozens of subsidiaries, small adjustments are always available, as we discussed. A global manager is unlikely to know nuances in each country, and that is why building relationship with the local unit managers is really essential. So let me give you an example about successful manager behavior in managing socioeconomic diversity. In one MNC, I had a chance to do the research. MNC had corporate strategy which divided country units according to their socioeconomic environments. So strategy saw, for example, Indian unit as a low-cost labor unit, which is executing projects to reduce the cost for the company, while employees in the European units were these who were sort of serving local economically advanced, if we can say so, customers. So this socioeconomic diversity among the units led to the very negative perceptions in Indian unit and their unwillingness to accept the strategy. But Indian unit had great subsidiary manager who was trying to achieve global goals by local methods and sort of reduce the tensions. So here is one situation, for example, how that manager tried to adapt and give small adjustments into the global goals. So under the continuous pressure to save costs in Indian unit, one of the requirements was to save on facility costs. For example, by reducing costs of electricity used in the office buildings. And subsidiary manager, instead of communicating to the local team this fact openly and saying that we should save costs on electricity, this means air conditioning system will be switched off in the office from 7 p.m. in the evening. He took another position and he informed the staff about the matter while addressing a very important problem in Indian unit. So what he did, manager communicated that MNC would like to address the issue of Indian local team overload and overworking. So in order to incentivize people to reduce their work load and to encourage them to leave office earlier, air conditioning system will be switched off by 7 p.m. Make sure sort of you get your work done by that time and go home to see your families. In this way of contextualized communication allowed achieving financial goals in cost reduction set by the Finnish headquarters, but simultaneously preempted tensions which might have arrived if this communication about the target would have been grounded in the socioeconomic differences upon which strategy was actually created. This example also is very relevant for the point 1 about integration. Many times diversity issues are highly related to company strategy and processes. We just need to put on diversity glasses to see them and to address them in our communication and management practices. The other example of contextualization comes from implementing diversity management in recruitment. So we may have global rules in certain requirements, for example, that each candidate or applicant should be evaluated and interviewed at least by 2 organizational representatives in order to reduce biases in the recruitment process. The other global requirement rule for this process could be that the team of evaluators would consist of both genders. So that's sort of the global rules that we could set for the whole corporation and all the units in it. Now, locally, we would encourage subsidiaries to look at the diversity dimensions that are relevant for their context and ask them to diversify evaluator team at least by other 2 diversity dimensions according to the context of the unit, right? So, for example, in France, US, or India, finding 2 evaluators from different ethnical or religious background would be something natural. While, for example, in Finland or Lithuania, where the countries are really homogeneous in terms of culture, this would be almost impossible. So in the latter countries, where ethnic diversity is very low, subsidiary could choose other important aspects of diversity, for instance, having younger and older evaluators in the team. Finally, lack of manager and executive accountability and lack of communication, lack of connection to diversity management issues in business can be addressed by really linking actual operational work to diversity and diversity management issues. So here is one more example from my research. Most of the engineering companies consider that engineering is done the same way across the countries and across the people. Engineers are sort of very rational people and they have shared language of engineering. This is partly true, but what I found was that the way engineers approach engineering process and the way they visualize the drawing, even if they use the same technology, are highly different. So therefore, multinationals need to update the project management process by giving a space for global team members to discuss first their natural ways to approach the process of engineering and the way engineers see the outcome. Managers should be instructed to monitor the process by explaining to global team members how this cognitive diversity in doing engineering is likely to affect their daily work of engineers and overall outcomes of the whole global team. So that is why for every organization, it is extremely important to understand what kind of diversity and in what ways affect their daily operations rather than generally running trainings or communicating about the need to respect everyone, the need to value everyone's ideas, etc. People will end up being tired from these disattached discussions, but this will not result in respect and valuing each other, and this will never become a part of their daily behaviors at work, because simply they will not be able to link diversity management to their mundane daily tasks. So these are the points I wanted to share with you in the 4 video lectures. I hope you will retain your interest in diversity management further, and I wish you all the best and thank you for your attention.